Thanks, Sinead. Hi, everyone. As Sinead said, today we're going to focus on how we approach decarbonisation strategies and solutions and energy efficiency in commercial buildings, so offices and retail units and that kind of environment. As our name might suggest, our mission here is to cool the planet, and what we're going to show really is our kind of operating system for doing that. So without further ado, firstly, I suppose it's good to understand that decarbonisation, generally it is a business transformation problem. It's not just a kind of a carbon accounting issue or a compliance issue. It really does sort of require a top-down and a bottom-up commitment from everybody who's involved. So cultural readiness is key, and so too is data readiness. That's really be the theme of what we're going to show today is how we approach this with data. So our solution, it involves sort of a blend of software, some renewable technologies, including some grid services, a lot of engineering expertise layered in and around that, and education for all of the internal and external stakeholders kind of along that journey. Firstly, our decarbonisation strategy, it does take a kind of a bottom-up approach. We firstly sort of look really to reduce demand for energy by improving control. So basically, stop using energy that you don't need. And our experience is 5 to 10%. It's really less than typical, and really costs nothing to turn something off that shouldn't be on. And good data really is key for spotting these opportunities and for locking them in when they're achieved. The second kind of level of that really is the kind of cleaner level, where we look to upgrade equipment and technology. So boilers, chillers, pumps, fans, upgrading these for more modern, energy efficient assets can, deliver 20 to 30%, pretty common in that regard. After that, where possible, we look to incorporate renewable energy, such as solar and wind with on-site storage technologies, which can also generate some interesting and attractive grid services revenues. What we've seen is the decarbonisation of grids across Europe and the UK really does provide a kind of a unique and significant opportunity for organisations to even deliver 50 to 70% carbon reductions by converting their current oil and gas powered heat sources to electrically powered heat pumps and boilers. Really after that, you're kind of looking at outside the boundaries of the facility maybe, and looking at green energy procurement, investments maybe in carbon offsets and supply chain management. So what we have seen, I think, for some tier 1 emitters is that scope 3 can account for up to 70% of carbon emissions, which is kind of really putting a massive supply chain pressure on supply chains, and that's having quite an interesting network effect. So that's our kind of general strategy approach and kind of roadmap, if you want to put it that way. How we actually do that. So I guess, in our data-led approach, the first thing we look to do is integrate what is often sort of siloed energy systems in these facilities centralized into our own Clarity platform. So we would distill thousands of data points from hundreds of assets and controllers into really a handful of dashboards and reports that convert all of that data into sort of useful and timely information. Secondly, then we kind of analyze that information for insights and opportunities. We'll develop those opportunities into fully engineered projects. We then deliver and project manage those upgrades, and we certify the energy and carbon reduction savings post-project. Again, with our Clarity platform, then we help to lock those savings in and make sure that sort of low-hanging fruit doesn't really grow back. All of these kind of wee bits here, could also be delivered by our partners and clients, should they have the resources, or a kind of combination of all of us. But what really sort of underlines the integrity of this entire process is the software platform Clarity. And you'd be glad to know we're not going to conflict too many more slides. What we really want to do today is bring this to life a little bit in terms of some of the examples and case studies for how we've delivered the types of savings that we're talking about here. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Dara. He's going to bring you through a couple of examples, and we'll share over and back.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sean. And as Sinead and Sean have said, thanks so much, guys, for taking the time to spend with us today. And hopefully we can uncover and work through some valuable insights and ways that you can currently leverage your data to bring value to the buildings that you might be managing. So I'm going to start off with some very simple stuff. It's not that sexy, but it's fundamental to the day-to-day life of an energy manager in a commercial building, or a person that is managing the utilities or the assets within that commercial building. And why I start off on this example that we'll get into is a lot of the clients that we approach, they might have a portfolio of buildings. Some of those buildings may be data rich. They might have some really good EMSs or BMSs and EMSs on site, but then some of those buildings might have absolutely zero instrumentation whatsoever. And it's kind of daunting for some, knowing where to start. You know, they get scared around huge capex around instrumentation, and yeah, not really knowing where they should start. But what we have found through our years of experience in gathering data, leveraging it, and analyzing it, there are a number of ways that you can start adding value without even installing additional instrumentation. I'm going to go through one or two of those ways with you at the moment. Like I said, I'm going to start off with bill validation. So this is applicable to gas, electricity, water, even waste. And it's an area that no one really likes to spend too much time in. No one likes looking at bills day in, day out, but there is some value to hone from your bills. And the beautiful thing about our platform, Clarity, is it will automatically digitize those bills, and you can visualize them in a different way, different than how we're commonly used to visualizing bills. So this is an example of such digitization of a bill, and you can see up at the top of our screen here, over the time period that I've picked on this particular dashboard, you can see how much they paid for electricity over that time period. And then we've split out all of the charges within that bill. So you can see three different types of visualizations on your screen. Up at the top here, we have headline figures. Over on the left-hand side, we've split out those exact same data points just in a pie chart. And this gives you the ability to see the percentages of, where these charges, where they're going, what exactly is making up your bill, and how it's affecting your bill. And the exact same data point then over on the right-hand side, just trending it. And it's so important, guys, to visualize data. And I can't say that enough, and I'm probably going to say it a couple of times during this webinar, but you can really, gain a lot from even simple visualization of data. And like as soon as one of our guys built this dashboard, the first thing that popped out on me on this trend graph was the same for everyone over the last couple of months, the last year. Energy prices are just skyrocketing, and they're going to keep going up and up and up. So it's, it is really important, and it's a vital time to get a handle on your energy, your assets, your utilities on site. And most importantly, from a dashboard like this, like hopefully month to month, year to year, you're balancing and you're paying what you should be paying. But we have found with almost around 30% of our client base are getting overcharged, and sometimes it's a very small percentage, sometimes it's a large percentage, sometimes it's down to human error on the utility provider, and a whole facet of different reasons. But if you can harness that data, digitize it like we have done here, and balance what you're paying, how everything is listed on your bill, does it balance up to that final figure? You can see this trend graph here that's comparing all of these charges that make up your bill, comparing them with that final figure at the end of your bill. And the majority of time, they balance out as you would expect. But over the last 3 years for this particular client, they were overcharged by almost €6,000, which isn't a huge amount of money, but it's money at the end of the day that could maybe be put into digitization or additional meters. And that's exactly what these guys did with it in this case. And it's a good way to balance your bills and make sure you're paying what you should be paying. So that's an example of bill digitization. So my next example, and again, this is all in front of the meter, guys. This isn't any hardware, additional instrumentation on site. the next two dashboards and the previous one is everything you can do without getting hardware involved. So everyone has freely available utility data at a 15-minute interval or a 30-minute interval. And this particular one, this dashboard that we're looking at, just gives you an overall high-level energy breakdown of this building. And we have half an hour and 15-minute data coming in from electricity and gas. And like I said, visualizing how your energy is being consumed can do so much for you. Just by looking at that trend, the peaks and troughs, when you're over consuming, when you're under consuming, it's a really good starting point in your digitization journey. So this dashboard again simply breaks out the same data points just in different visualizations. Again, I can see my total electricity accounts for almost 70% on this site, while 30% goes towards gas, and then trending it out. Really important starting point. It can focus you in which direction you want to take in optimization standpoints moving forward. And then look, another great thing, and I'm going to keep on saying how great Clarity is because I think it is a great platform. But with a click of a button, you can now take that sort of high-level overview of your energy and convert it into a carbon reporting dashboard. Something that might not have been on the top of everyone's minds, 3-4 years ago. But it's definitely an ask that we've been getting from our clients, and something our company, Cool Planet, has been pushing for a number of years. But now the clients are starting to demand it. So it's definitely a very important monthly, weekly, daily report that the majority of our commercial building clients are asking for. And to that end, we're going to pass you back over to Sean, who's going to show you an example of a portfolio level kind of reporting dashboard that still stays in front of the meter. So we're still just leveraging 2 points and what we can do with those very few 2 points.
Thanks, Dara. Yeah, and yeah, I suppose focusing again and still say just on that front of meter kind of data. This is a example of a portfolio dashboard where all we've really taken in this instance is mains electricity and mains gas for what is 16 different sites. However, what we've done is kind of then started to layer in some of the metadata that we gathered around the buildings, such as the various different factors for what might be carbon, from gas and elec, and they do vary, across Europe, across the world. There are parts of the world where carbon is, 0.2 kgs per kilowatt hour, and there are parts of the world where it's 2 kgs per kilowatt hour. So the carbon factor and emissions factor is interesting, especially for customers who might have a global footprint. So what we do is we bring that data in, we bring the histories of that data in the same way as we would with energy and price costs historically, as Dara has shown, and we'll marry that with the energy data to create those sorts of different movements of trends in both cost and in energy and in carbon. So this example dashboard is really aggregating what is again, energy and gas across 16 sites and total energy. We've got a total cost figure. And then we've got scope 1 and scope 2 emissions from all of the different builds, from all of the different sites, and a total aggregated scope 1 and 2 emissions factor for these over the course of 1 year. Of course, what we want to do is to try to figure out where, which of these sites is really contributing to, the sort of the biggest levels of inefficiency. So we've created KPIs. We've got the floor areas for all of the buildings, and we've looked at really 2 or 3 KPIs. So gas kilowatt hours per meter squared and an elec kilowatt hours per meter squared. And you can see here the effect of how some of these sites are varying in terms of their benchmark KPIs. The big challenge, of course, with benchmarking and KPIs in the sector is that really it's come from a place of kind of an audit snapshot. So the standard really in commercial buildings is kilowatt hours per meter squared per year. So you're really getting an audit snapshot of 1 year, and that's your benchmark KPI. What people need today really are more operational KPIs, so that you can see on a daily basis or a weekly basis whether you're trending up or down on what would be your target. as an example for this report, we've chosen some standard SIBSI targets. So we looked at what the best practice target should be for KPI and ALEC in this instance, and we've plotted them on this dashboard to kind of give an indication, if you like, of how far away this portfolio might be from what would be regarded as SIBSI best practice. And you can see the level. I mean, this is an aggregated KPI for gas at 152 kilowatt hours per square meters, almost double what the SIBSI target benchmark should be. ALEC is not at target, but it's still a good bit over. And then what we've been able to do, again, just as a high level indicator, is show what that potential savings is. And maybe it's not all potentially there, but it's certainly a gap to optimum that's worth trying to close. And we can show you some examples of how that would close. So I can click, for example, here on one of these sites, and it will refilter this board and show again, what those savings percentages might be on that site. I can click on another site, and it'll recalculate the efficiencies here. In addition to that, and again, what we're always trying to get to with reporting in general is something that's more operational. So it's not an annual audit where you get a cert to say you're here, and then you wait another year to find out how you're getting on. What we really want to do is kind of zone in and target on a weekly basis, weekly profiles, and weekly performance. So I'll just show you one example where we're looking at a site here where we can see that there's potentially 30% gas savings and maybe the same, 16% on electricity. What we're doing, and again, we're only pulling mains incoming electricity and gas here. We want to plot, this year's consumption versus last year, just so we can see, is there seasonal variation? Is there, year on year, or even week on week differences? And, it's really clear. There's a really clear example of, on the electricity side, for example, and Dara will show how we've used Clarity to target these, but you've got day loads and night loads. This is an hourly profile over a week, this week versus last week, if you like. And what you can see here is this week, during the nighttime periods, these troughs here on that graph, there are base loads of 41 kilowatts being achieved. But the previous week, during the exact same hour of the day, they're running at 63, so in excess of 20 kilowatts. So we know that the achievable target here, baseload target, is 40 kilowatts, and so with some confidence we could say that there's an excess here, and it's due to some load that's just not really been turned off, whether it's a ventilation unit or some fans or an AHU or something like that. So part of what we do initially is to look at those baseline targets and try to introduce operating procedures by surfacing this data, giving it to building operators and facilities managers, and allowing them to ensure that they're hitting their baseload targets before buildings are closed down in the evening times. On the gas side, you can see similar sort of trends here, where again, the dark purple trend here is this week. So in this instance, we're now shutting the boilers off at 7 o'clock in the evening. They're at zero until, again, maybe 7 or 6, maybe even the following morning. Where you can see the week previous, they weren't being shut off at all. So you had gas consumption right through the night. And that's kind of right through that portfolio. We show a similar example on other sites. And again, the inefficiency cost is quite significant. You could see how that all rolls up across this portfolio, and across each one of these sites. It really helps to focus. Well, where do we target? Which sites are our real, contributors to this inefficiency? So what I'm going to hand you back to Dara now, who's going to show you an example. So say we look at this site, 56% gas savings, is the gap to target. That might look outrageous, but when we show you, again, some of the trends of what's happening on these sites, you'll see that those sorts of savings are actually achievable.
Absolutely achievable. And to your point about the commercial building world, just really being used to submitting those or looking at their energy over a yearly basis isn't good enough anymore, right? You really need to get down to that 7-day rolling period, or maybe that monthly period. And the beautiful thing about Clarity is it gives you the feedback needed to actually do something about it within that time frame, instead of waiting for large chunks of the year to fly by. So as Sean said, that portfolio kind of level dashboard that you were looking at, there's a lot of different building blocks that go into that from numerous different sites. This is an example of one of them. And what we always like to do, no matter what we're doing project-wise, or if we're trying to uncover initiatives or solutions, is we always put together like a feasibility kind of dashboard. What is the size of the prize? If we have multiple versions of those, and we submit them to the client or go over them with their energy team, then they're focused. They have all the data they need, the information they need to see what areas they want to focus in. So they're really making more informed decisions of where they want to possibly spend their CapEx, if they have CapEx to spend, or where they want to center and focus their resources, because they have all of this data at their fingertips. So as Sean mentioned, one of those areas was looking at gas consumption. And again, guys, remember, we're just leveraging one data point here to build a dashboard like this. And you can see in this example, almost 54% savings. So those CIBSE targets, they're not outrageous, because this exact example site, was over consuming, where we were able to bring them back down to that 54%. They were wasting almost half of, or consuming over double what they should have been consuming. And the savings from this actually, in and around that 40,000 sterling mark, that paid for Clarity on this particular site for a number of years. And this was within 2 weeks of us sort of interacting with the site. So those annual savings actually paid for our services and Clarity as a service for the preceding years, which is great. So just to bring you down through this dashboard, again, one data point that we're pulling from the gas utility providers. You can see the trend here. We also have another data point that we loaded up into Clarity. It's a Boolean showing when that building is occupied. So you can see there's large chunks of time here where there's no one in the building, and still it's over consuming. And this might not be the case in every single commercial building, but on this one, they were definitely well over consuming their gas on site. So we ran and started looking at this, spent a bit of time on it, and we proposed sort of what, the times when the boiler should be running. So coming on maybe 3 hours before the people in this building come in. This building operates from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. So that if the boiler came on 3 hours beforehand, heated up that building sufficiently for the people coming in, and then switched off once the people left the building. You can now see very quickly, and again, I said at the start, being able to visualize data and how when you bring multiple variables into one equation, say, and the output of it, which is what we've done here, we utilized those Boolean points, embedded them in with the gas consumption, and now we can see those areas where they're over consuming a huge amount of time and a huge amount of waste. And where we did that and where we build our dashboards, and I would love to spend a lot more time with you individually, maybe after this webinar, going into the background of Clarity and workbenches and how dashboards are created. But I'm going to spend a very small amount of time on it today because we only have an hour. So that all of our dashboards are created within workbenches. So that one we were just looking at, this is the workbench for that dashboard. So we can start visualizing data in different types of visualizations, whether it's trend graphs, headline figures, pie charts. What you can see on your screen at the moment, so that's linear regression. We're taking your heating degree days and we're running a linear regression with your gas, and just seeing the correlation between those two data points, which is great on any energy initiative project, because now you've got an output or a formula that you can use as a baseline. So any changes you made, if you want to go back to whoever's signing off your checks, you have a really good M&V plan that shows you, look, this is what we would have been consuming if we hadn't had taken certain steps. Also, looking at your heating degree days versus your gas, just visualizing that. And all the building blocks of that dashboard, this is where they were created. But for me, one of the many standout features of Clarity is the ability to add sort of soft or virtual sensors. So you're leveraging real data, putting it into maybe equations to generate new soft data or virtual sensors. And look, this is an example of that. Where we're taking the gas, we're introducing those new Boolean points, and from that we can bring up this data point here, which is your excess gas consumption, and it really informs you then how much price is on the table there to get.
Yeah, just a quick point to note as well, that like the heating degree days, it's not uploaded, as a file and downloaded from it. It's live in Clarity. Clarity has access to thousands of weather stations globally, so pulls that stuff in on an hourly basis and a daily basis. It can forecast it 3 days in advance, as most weather stations will provide that. So that ability to look at yesterday's consumption and know whether you're 10% or 20% above or below is informed by those important variables. So having that in real time is kind of critical for the operational understanding of performance.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Sinead, you were going to say something?
But just somebody has just asked, would it be possible to do any of this without Clarity? What if you don't have Clarity?
You definitely could. You won't be able to do it as efficiently and as we could do it. It's going to be a lot more rigorous, a lot more labor intensive. Say if you're leveraging that data in Excel, and again, you got to remember you're not going to have it live. So any crunching you're going to do is going to be historical. You're maybe going to pull data in, put it into Excel, and then start working on it. Look, the beautiful thing for me, for someone that's been analyzing data for a number of years, is the live nature of Clarity, and how you can play with your data, leverage it in different ways and visualize it. It really is. I know I work for Cool Planet and I sell Clarity, but it really is an unbelievable product.
Yeah, it's back to that point again about without Clarity, it's a snapshot. You get a snapshot or an audit of how a building has performed over a certain period of time. Once that snapshot is finished, when are you getting your next snapshot? How do you operationally know on a day-to-day and a week-to-week whether you're moving the needle toward your target or not? And that's where you need the kind of real-time information.
Yeah, exactly. And the changes you're making, seeing the impact straight away, that's
just
invaluable in itself. Look, this is another example, the same kind of procedure. We're still just focusing on in front of the meter on your site, and instead of gas, this time it's electricity. And as you can see, it's still a huge percentage of savings there. We're talking 20% in this case, and the monetary figure there over on the right hand side. And it's the same scenario. So because this is a template, as soon as we get that data in, we don't have to spend time building this. Clarity is intuitive enough that we have all these templates built up, so we just suck that data in, and straight away we will have templated dashboards like this that we can provide on your behalf. So this is very similar. We're just looking at the operational time of the building and its base load, and looking at how much it's consuming outside of operating hours, and through that equation builder, being able to visualize that, and then also see it in a headline figure. How much is this actually worth in an energy perspective, and in a monetary perspective. So it really gives you the basis to make changes and see exactly where you can start saving straight away. And that's just based on 2 data points and your bills, everything we've covered so far. The next thing I'd like to go through with you is, when you're on site looking at assets, if you have a little bit more data maybe on site, so maybe those data rich sites, or those sites that have more assets with more PLC outputs from them, or BMSs or EMSs on site. So this particular example is looking at a HVAC. So a HVAC is a common asset on nearly all commercial buildings. That's why I chose it to go over today. And what we do as a company, this is actually an example of a POV, or a proof of value. So more often than not, before we go hand in hand and start working day to day with our clients, we do like to prove our value, which might take a 2-week period or a 3-week period, and certain milestones are agreed upon, and we achieve them, and then we start working together. So this is an example of that. It's centered around a HVAC. we only had 7 data points available to us. And you can see straight away it was over a month. So seven data points over a month period. And the savings that were uncovered came to €5,000. So a significant amount of money and energy from still a very small pool of data. So I'm just going to bring you through the whole storyline here of what happened. And so one of our SMEs, our subject matter experts in the HVAC world, would have got a hold of these data points. There was 3 pieces of equipment that made up this HVAC unit, 3 main pieces of equipment, 2 water-cooled chillers and 1 air-cooled chiller. And his first step was just to add all of those energy consumptions together and generate that blue trend that you can see on your screen. And then, as Sean mentioned, there's quite a number of other data points, weather station data points that we pull in as well. And as this guy is a subject matter expert, he knows that wet bulb temperature should have a direct correlation on how those pieces of equipment are consuming their energy. So his first port of call was, again, I've said it before, but visualizing that data. So he's visualizing if there's any correlation straight up off that trend graph, which to him there wasn't. So his next step, as you've seen in my previous demo, was to run a linear regression. So Clarity has the ability to run a linear regression, multilinear regression, all of these tools that help you make sense of your data and put use to your data. So again, that's compounded or underlined his initial thought. For those of you that understand linear regression, you're looking for a high R² value. So anywhere between 0.8, you're never going to achieve 1, but 0.8 and 0.99. So you can see in this case, 0.26. So no correlation. These 2 variables are not impacting one off the other at all. So straight away he was thinking there's either no control on this system or very little control. So the next thing he wanted to do was to deep dive into each one of those 3 pieces of equipment. And again, this is where it starts getting very interesting for the likes of me. So on the screen there, you can see live COPs and live cooling energies. So both of these data points aren't coming from an actual meter, they're engineering calculations. And where we generated them was in our workbench, in our equation builder. So we're taking 3 live data points, the flow rates, temperature in and out of that particular system, and we're embedding them in your energy, your cooling energy equation. So MC delta T, very generic engineering equation, and we're developing this live soft virtual sensor that you can see in green here. So again, like I mentioned, taking historical data and crunching it in the likes of Excel, you're always behind the time, you're lagging in decision making. That's a beautiful thing about Clarity, being able to see things live. And from that cooling energy data point, we can now create an operating COP. So a live COP, and COP relates to how efficient that piece of equipment is performing. And so straight away, this guy, was able to see very low COP, not what he would have been expecting to see in an efficient system, and a lot of peaks and troughs there. And he carried that out, that same procedure on all 3 pieces of equipment, and same for all of them, all very low efficiencies. So then he generated, through the equation builder, he modeled out what the consumption should be of that system if there was just a small bit of control introduced. And that's what you can see in red versus the actual, which is in blue. And like what we really wanted to focus on today was the simple steps you can take to find value in your data and bring your energy consumption down in your commercial buildings. But there's a whole raft of other outputs from Clarity, like the digitalization of the building, modeling, really in-depth modeling. But we just felt it wasn't for today's call. But if you do want to reach out after this, we can go into more depth around that. So he modeled out what it should have been. We brought this back to the client at the end of our POV, and they were able to substantiate, there was no control on this system. And so there was no CapEx required on this. They had all of the facilities to interact control on the system, which they did. And that 5,000 actually went up slightly by 10-15%. But again, this is a perfect example of developing a feasibility dashboard, seeing what the size of the prize is, and it gives our clients the ability to make informed decisions of where they want to divert their resources and their CapEx. So that's an example of a HVAC. So my next example is more capital intense, but has a much bigger punch. And this particular commercial building is a very, very large building, and it has a very large sort of cooling and heating demand, which is rare enough. It's just what this particular building does. It has a demand for both. So heat pump technology is a technology that is really becoming fast, one of the major technologies to help clients on their roadmap to net zero and decarbonization, especially if you're using renewable electricity sources or purchasing green electricity from the grid. So this is just an MMV example dashboard, which again, very important on any kind of project that you do, that you can go back and look at what you used to consume, and have an overall snapshot view of the same savings involved, and how this impacted how your building is consuming energy. So you can see these guys started off with a very high annual consumption of oil on this site. And we introduced ourselves and started working with them around this point, and the heat pump technology was one of the solutions put forward after we did everything else that I described there and optimized everything else on site. Once we squeezed every bit of efficiency we could out of the site as it was, then we moved on to investing in new technology like heat pumps. So you can see this huge drop in kilowatt oil from the boiler there as soon as that heat pump went in, and that went on for the next couple of years. So some huge savings involved there, 63.4% savings. And then that building actually expanded a year later. Its footprint grew, and its heating and cooling demands increased, and we installed a second heat pump, which further decreased the consumption of their chillers on site. So you can see that initial drop from heat pump 1 being installed, and then another drop from heat pump 2 being installed. So it really is, it's a game changer technology for decarbonization out there for our clients at the moment. And then finally, from a sort of example dashboards, and like I said, there's so many different examples I would love to bring you guys through. We just don't have enough time in this particular hour, but if you reach out afterwards, I'd love to get in more depth in different dashboards and different outputs and services that we provide. But one thing that's come to the fore for everyone over the last year or two has been air quality. So it's been a big feature in commercial buildings opening back up, and keeping the personnel, the people within those buildings safe. And what we have found is the majority of our clients, to ensure that health and safety need is ticked, they will just ramp their HVAC up to 100%, or they'll open up all their ventilation possible, just to ensure as much air changes as possible. And look, from a starting point, that's good. You're ensuring the safety, but it's not sustainable going forward, and it can't be the way you operate going forward. So what we've started to do on behalf of a lot of our clients is install these sort of air quality monitors, and then we're bringing that data back into Clarity and their BMSs that they have on site. So we're looking at really important data points like PM 2.5. I'm not an expert in air quality or anything like that, but over the last 2 years, I have learned that PM 2.5 relates to the amount of dust particles in the air, and the concentration of those dust particles, and how this has been tied to like viral infections or viral outputs like COVID. Is the higher the PM 2.5 number is, the higher the transmissivity, because someone coughs out a bit of COVID or whatever you're going to cough out, it latches onto that dust particle and then is strewn into someone else's unfortunate mouth. So if you can control those PM 2.5 levels, along with your total volatile organic compounds in the air and your carbon dioxide, keep them within levels that are acceptable, and just consume the amount of energy you need to consume, or not open up all the windows, ventilation, so all that heat that you're producing is just streaming outside and it's been wasted. If you can ensure you're in the acceptable or tolerance levels, you're taking that health and safety need, but you're also you're not over consuming in energy. You're consuming exactly what you need to consume. So from a visual standpoint, We like to create trend graphs like this, where you have the actual trend of that PM 2.5, for example, and then we've baked in your warning levels and your alert levels, and then these are tied to actual alerts or watchers, what we call them in Clarity, that are sent out to notify certain people within that premises, or that signal is sent to the BMS to maybe make a change and how something is being controlled. But it's all about leveraging your data to be as efficient as possible, and it's no different when it comes to air quality. And yeah, as far as a demo point of view on Clarity, Sean, that pretty much sums it up.
Well done.
Thank you.
Very good. Learned a bit there myself. There was a question there I saw coming in, Sinead. We might as well address that. I was going to also show.
It's a good one, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So how does Clarity source real-time data from gas and electric networks? It kind of varies depending on where you are. Some countries and regions are more mature about this type of thing than others. The UK, for example, are quite mature in how they have systemized the gathering of network data, but also supporting the and promoting automated meter readings and AMR technologies and whatnot. So there's a system of data collectors and data aggregators who operate in the UK who can make this data available really easily. A lot of brokers would access this data with a letter of authority and obtain it for the purposes of bill validation and maybe brokering supply contracts. However, a lot of them also do provide APIs. So what we've done in certain instances, we've done this in the UK, we've done it in France as well. We can get daily APIs. So maybe sometimes it's not real time, but if we're getting at 7:30 in the morning, half hourly data for all of yesterday, that reporting functionality that we were showing earlier is possible, and you've got that kind of potential for daily reviews. Of course, we have technologies and there's lots of options for getting straight to the meter if you want it by the minute, and there's advantages to having that information by the minute. In that example, where you've got a building operator or manager who is targeting a baseload and won't leave the building until he's checked that they've hit their target baseload, then you kind of want it in real time. That's a powerful auditing tool as well, because when you're running trials, you say, well, look, maybe we'll turn this off. What's it going to achieve? Well, knock it off for 10 minutes and we'll watch. So that can be achieved again with some neat enough technology, pulse counters on meters and stuff like that. Fairly non-intrusive. But again, I think that the large benefit really is getting the APIs, getting that quarter hourly data or half hourly data, even daily. I think is of huge benefit, and the markets are generally becoming more and more mature about how they kind of surface that and offer it back. There's another question there about how quickly we can get Clarity up and running, which again is dependent. In actual fact, we've had Clarity up and running in instances like this without, again, having to install anything on site. If we could get a letter of authority, if we can get a historical data set, and we can get an API, we can have it up and running in a matter of days, in truth, at that level. Where we get into connecting to BMSs, there's obviously, a little bit of auditing required to understand what kind of connectors exist. It is a bit of a minefield out there with BMSs, whether they're Cylon or Trend or what sort of SCADA systems exist, but we have great experience, thankfully, at cracking those nuts over the years. And there's not a BMS or a SCADA that we haven't been able to integrate with, and generally, pretty economical, as well, just upgrading connectors and putting in some comms kit to pull that data back live. And then you've got your mains incomer data, but you've now got your temperature ranges and all of your set points from the building as well. And maybe we didn't get into it today as well, but thermal comfort factors are really interesting as well across a lot of the buildings that we looked at. We've only really shown the high level, but when we've delved into them, we've created an interesting KPI, which is a kind of a high level roll up of how compliant a building is in its different rooms in terms of the the temperature compliance. So obviously, you want to keep temperature in a range between 18 and 22 degrees. If you're getting a daily report that's saying, across all of the temperature sensors in this room spent 10% of its time within that range, then you've got a problem. And they're the kind of indicators you need to be kind of aggregating and rolling up in order to manage a portfolio or to manage a building even, and to be targeting 100% compliance with those ranges. And that's what you get from that BMS data. But again, that's quite quickly as well. Once you get a connector, we get that data onboarded really quickly. So in the space of a few weeks, I would say.
So good one. How is Clarity any different from any other EMS system available in the market?
Well, I suppose there's a little bit of how is Cool Planet really different to other ENMS providers in the market, and that's I suppose where we feel we have a strength. We really aren't just a software provider. We're a decarbonisation operating system, with a data-led approach. So Clarity, as you'll have seen, is a very flexible and powerful platform, that can be utilised in really any sector. And again, the power of it really is when you get behind the meter, when you get connected to BMS, and it's really all about how you integrate and marry data sources together. So another really good example, actually, we have an office obviously in Australia, and there's a rating system there called Neighbours or Neighbours, which is it solves that problem, that benchmark problem, which is kilowatt hours per meter squared per year. But really, you want to know today, was my consumption yesterday above or below what it should be? And it's easy to say, well, it was cold yesterday, so the heating was higher, but how much higher should it have been? Mm-hmm. You need an operational rating system, and Neighbours kind of cracks that nut. And what it does is it incorporates the heating degree days, and it builds its own algorithm in, and it takes in the local emissions factors from the region geographically that you're in, and it applies and gives you that star rating every day.
Because it's coming into the UK as well, right?
Coming into the UK, yeah, it's been brought in by BREEAM, are bringing it in, and we'll be launching it in Ireland pretty soon as well. Mm-hmm. But again, Clarity, that equation building and that data processing function, it allowed us pretty easily. We were able to license the Neighbours algorithm. You have to pay for it, but if you license it, you can bring it in. You can surface it on a dashboard. Here's your operational rating. So I'm not sure how many of the other reporting systems are able to kind of perform at a processing level quite like that, or an operations level quite like that.
So this is one of the questions I don't have an answer to. Is briefly explain what types of meters and methods you use to access asset or income or data, where you kind of piggy bank on existing meters.
Well, it's coming into a system like an existing EMS or BMS. Yeah. Like Sean mentioned, they're predominantly usually Cylon, Trend, Tritium. So we're getting into real IT speak now, but you're going to be looking for certain protocols like Modbus or BACnet to try and pull all of that data from that system into Clarity. But it's easily done. It just you need to spend a bit of time auditing it and seeing exactly what's in play.
Yeah, I mean, in truth, like a lot of that tech and has been around for 20, 30 years,
Longer, yeah.
Communications protocols and buildings and facilities haven't changed. Modbus, BACnet, it's been the same. So the protocols for integrating it, whether it's Modbus RTU or TCP/IP or whatever it is, they're pretty standard. And generally, I suppose it's important for us to point out as well, we're pretty agnostic technologically.
No, it definitely a means to an end for us. It's just about getting that data in and being able to harness and leverage it, right? How we do it, or what kind of meters are installed, doesn't really.
Exactly, yeah. And there's a range, there's a spectrum of sophistication there, that you can get data. Maybe it's not real time, maybe it's only once a day, or you're getting integrated, at 1 minute, 1 second fresh, interval levels. So there's really a range there, I suppose, that you can apply. There was another comment there as well.
Do you want to respond to that? Can you read it? One thing that should be taken into consideration is energy prices are now changing so fast that reducing primary energy consumption using Clarity reduces CO2 emissions and OPEX. The system allows optimization of energy and achieve these reductions.
Yes, it does.
I think that's saying where Clarity is.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Yeah, look, I suppose you saw the graph earlier that are presented, you know, doubling, you know, that's where energy prices have gone in the last few weeks. You know, all of the Irish utility suppliers have all announced like massive hikes in energy prices. And it is important to factor that, because they do change quite a bit, and it has a massive impact then on, you know, the projects that you might have considered 6 months ago, all of a sudden are really acceptable, attractive projects now because of the change in those rates.
Actually, something's just after popping into my mind there. An example from a client site that we're working on, where a heat pump has been in play for the last 6-7 years. And just 2 or 3 weeks ago, one of the buffer tanks within that system, something happened to it, so the heat pump system itself isn't up and running now. So they've gone back to their LPG gas, and their bills have tripled over the last 3 weeks. So for the last 7 years, you know, those guys have been operating in a certain way, but not really knowing how much they were saving. But now they can see it. You know, the last 2 or 3 weeks, you know, they want to get that buffer tank fixed and get the system back up and running again, because they don't want to be paying, you know, 3 times the price of what they were paying before. So, you know, that change in price in energy is definitely a huge driving factor. And
the trade-offs between fossil fuels and electricity as well, certainly in relation to carbon emissions. I mean, I think in Ireland last year the average was about 42, somewhere between 42 and 45% renewably generated. Like, that's huge decarbonisation opportunity. So those heat pump projects are, you know, become really viable when you're looking at a decarbonisation strategy.
Sean, I know I jumped in there with questions before you may have been finished. Did you have anything else to
yeah, well, I guess we
wrap up?
Maybe one call to action, you know, which is as an offer to anybody who's maybe interested. We have lots of case studies which we can share, some of which was shown there very briefly. But yeah, again, for anyone who may be interested in exploring this further with us, you know, what we can do is have a chat. What we would suggest then is that we maybe get a letter, some sort of a letter of authority, where we can go and obtain electricity and fuel bills, and that might give us half-hourly data for some of your sites. We would then conduct a kind of a desktop analysis, and we might seek a little bit of extra information around floor areas and occupancy and stuff like that, and start to maybe produce some of these sorts of high-level opportunity assessments. We can produce a sample dashboard and a report, and you know, and maybe then you can consider whether it's something you want to maybe make an investment in or not. So that's really our offer to anyone who would like to take it up. We're available. The contact details are there. Sinead will reach out after the class.
The class now,
Masterclass.
Does that make us teachers?
No, just to say to everybody that we're going to send out the recording, so it'll be available. Any last questions before we leave? No, that was great, guys. Thank you very much, and thank you for this afternoon. Thank you very much. Bye.